Did you know, son? I once thought about quitting football at 16. It sounds impossible now, doesn't it? But I swear to you, there was a night in Lisbon, cold and wet, when I sat alone in a room no bigger than our kitchen pantry. The rain hit the window like it was angry. I had blisters on my feet, bruises on my ribs, and a lump in my throat that just wouldn't go away. That night, I wasn't a future legend. I was just a scared boy far from home, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. You were just a baby when I first told someone that story. But now, you're old enough to understand why I'm sharing it with you again. Because these memories, these scars, they're not just stories. They're lessons. They're maps. They're everything I wish someone had told me when I was your age, walking alone into the unknown with nothing but a dream and a pair of boots. And today, I want to talk to you about someone who changed me, without even trying to. Ibrahimović. He never pulled me aside for advice. He didn't pat me on the back or whisper secrets into my ear. But watching him, how he moved, how he lived, how he refused to bend for anyone, it taught me more than 1,000 coaches ever could. But to understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. To Madeira. To where it all started. Do you know what it means to leave everything at 12 years old? To walk away from your family, your friends, the sea air that smells like home, just to chase something no one else believes in but you? I remember saying goodbye to your grandmother, my mother, and pretending to be strong. I didn't cry in front of her. But on the plane to Lisbon, I held my tears like a ball I couldn't control. I didn't want to leave, but I had to. Sometimes, to become the man you're meant to be, you have to break the boy you were. Lisbon was no fairy tale. I lived in a small room with 3 other boys, sharing one shower between us. Sometimes we didn't have hot water. I washed my socks by hand, hung them on a nail in the wall. My stomach growled more than it sang. I missed dinner some nights because I was too shy to ask. And then there was the pitch. That cold, unforgiving turf where they didn't care that I was from a tiny island. They called me Toothpick. Laughed at my accent. Said I'd never make it. I trained like a maniac, not because I was confident, but because I was terrified. I didn't want to go home a failure. Every sprint, every drill, every lonely night. I played like my life depended on it. Because in many ways, it did. And yet, I almost quit. One night, after a bad match, I stayed behind long after the other boys had gone. I sat on the bench, still in my boots, the stadium lights humming above me like ghosts. My legs ached. My heart felt hollow. I remember whispering into the night, maybe this isn't for me. But then, something strange happened. A man I barely knew, one of the older coaches, walked by, didn't stop, didn't even look at me. But as he passed, he said, "If it hurts this much, maybe you're doing something right." He just kept walking. I don't think he even remembers saying it. But to me, it felt like the universe answered. Like it gave me a sign, not in comfort, but in truth. You see, pain isn't always your enemy. Sometimes, it's your proof that you're on the edge of becoming something more. That lesson stayed with me. It lived in my muscles, and the calluses on my toes, and the early mornings and the empty stands. It became my language, the quiet, private discipline no one else saw. And years later, when I met Zlatan, I recognized it in him too. He didn't try to fit in. He didn't ask for permission. He walked like a man who already knew who he was, even when the world doubted him. It wasn't arrogance. It was belief, the kind you forge in fire. And back then, I didn't understand that kind of silence. I wanted approval. I wanted people to say, "You're the best, Cristiano." But Ibrahimović? He didn't need anyone to clap. He celebrated alone, like a lion walking through smoke. That's when I started to see, not every lesson needs a voice. Sometimes, it's the way someone endures. The way they rise after falling. The way they never shrink themselves, even when the world tells them to. That's what he taught me, without saying a word. But I'm getting ahead of myself. that night in Lisbon wasn't the end of my doubts. It was only the beginning. Because if you keep climbing, the air only gets thinner. And the next chapter, son, it wasn't any easier. But it made me who I am. Let me tell you what happened when I arrived in England, where the lights were bright, but the shadows were long. When I first landed in England, I thought I was ready. After everything in Lisbon, the cold showers, the loneliness, the grind, I believed nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. Manchester wasn't just cold in weather, it was cold in silence. The sky always looked like it hadn't made up its mind. Gray. Heavy. And the people, they didn't hand out compliments easily. Especially not to an 18-year-old kid with bleached hair and too many stepovers. You know what, son? I thought I had to impress them with magic. So I danced with the ball, twisted and turned, trying to show them I was different. And I was, but not in the way they respected yet. There was a match, I still remember, against Bolton. I came on as a sub, and I played like a firework that didn't know where to explode. The crowd clapped politely, but in the dressing room, some of the older players weren't impressed. Too many tricks, one of them muttered. Another said, this isn't a circus. That hurt. Because I wasn't trying to show off. I was trying to survive. Trying to be seen. But they didn't see the fear behind the flicks. They only saw a boy who hadn't grown into the game yet. I went home that night and sat in the dark. No music. No lights. Just me and my doubts. I started to wonder, maybe I'm not strong enough for this. Maybe they were right. And yet, I didn't quit. Instead, I changed. Not who I was, but how I carried myself. I trained longer. Stayed later. I started lifting weights not to look good, but to hold my ground. I studied the game like a soldier studies maps, every movement, every pass, every mistake. I let my silence speak for me. And that's when I started to understand the real meaning of strength. You see, Junior, strength isn't shouting the loudest. It's walking into a room full of doubt and still believing you belong. It's hearing the boos and not shrinking. I learned that the hard way. There was a match at the Bernabeu years later, and I'll never forget it. I had scored in the previous 3 games. I was leading the league in goals. But I missed 2 chances that night, and the whistles began. At first, I thought they were for someone else. But then I looked around and realized they were for me. 80,000 people booing their own. Do you know what that feels like? To give everything, your sweat, your blood, your heart, and still be treated like a stranger in your own home? I could have lashed out. I could have pointed fingers. But I remembered Zlatan. I remembered how he walked through criticism like it was wind, how he never explained himself. So I said nothing. But I trained harder. The next match, I scored 2 goals. I didn't celebrate. I just looked at the crowd. Not angry. Not smug. Just calm. Like I had understood something deeper. You see, son, applause is sweet. But silence? Silence is sacred. Because in silence, you find yourself. And when the world turns its back, you learn whether your fire comes from the outside or from within. Ibrahimović understood that. He didn't crave love from the world. He built a kingdom inside himself. He ruled it quietly, fiercely. Watching him taught me that true power isn't domination, it's conviction. Conviction that your path is yours alone. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. There was another time, I was playing for Portugal, and I tore my hamstring during a warm-up. The doctor said I couldn't play. But it was a final. I had dreamed of this moment my whole life. So I sat on the bench, bandaged, helpless. And when I saw my teammates struggling, I stood up. Limped to the sideline. Shouted until my throat went raw. It wasn't about goals anymore. It was about giving whatever I had left. That's another thing I want you to know, Junior. Leadership isn't just about lifting trophies. It's about showing up, even when you have nothing to give but your presence. And let me tell you something even harder to admit. Sometimes, you can give your all and still lose. You can train perfectly, play with heart, and walk off the pitch empty-handed. I lost finals. I missed penalties. I cried, not in front of cameras, but in hotel rooms where no one saw. I broke down more times than people think. But I never broke apart. Because every pain was a teacher. And every doubt, a mirror. Ibrahimović never told me that. He didn't need to. I saw it in the way he stood tall when others fell. In the way he walked into hostile stadiums and played like he belonged, no matter the color of the shirts, the language of the crowd, or the stakes of the match. And that's what I want you to understand, son. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's dancing with fear and still stepping forward. When you walk into a room, or onto a pitch, or into a moment where the world is watching, remember this. You don't have to be the loudest. You just have to be real. And the world will feel you. Now, let me tell you about a night in Paris. About a trophy, but more importantly, what I learned after lifting it. Because the glory, Junior, it's never what you think it is. I remember that night in Paris like it just happened. Euro 2016. The final. I had dreamed of this for over a decade, to lift a major trophy with Portugal, to bring glory not just to a club, but to my country. The anthem played. I looked around the stadium, full of lights, flags, and expectation. And for a moment, I felt like that little boy in Madeira again, standing on the rooftop, kicking a ball into the wind, whispering prayers no one heard but God. The match started. We were focused, sharp. And then, the pain came. A tackle. My knee twisted. I tried to shake it off. You know me, son, I don't go down easy. But I couldn't walk properly. I tried 3 times to come back on the pitch, but each time, it felt like my body was saying, not today. When they brought the stretcher, I cried. Not because of the pain in my leg, but because of the pain in my heart. I felt like I had let my country down. Like I had failed at the most important moment of my life. They took me to the bench, and I wrapped myself in a towel, like I wanted to disappear. But then I looked up, and saw my teammates. Nervous. Uncertain. Some of them looking over at me, like they needed something more than tactics. They needed belief. So I stood up. Limped to the touchline. And I became something I never thought I could be that night. A voice. A presence. A captain not of feet, but of spirit. Every shout, every gesture, every tear, it wasn't about control. It was about love. Love for that jersey. Love for those men. Love for the journey that had brought us all there. When Eder scored the winning goal, it was like the world stopped. We weren't just champions. We were more. We were proof that you don't need a perfect path to reach your destiny. And when I lifted that trophy, I thought I'd feel complete. But here's the truth, son, and I need you to hear this with your whole heart. The trophy wasn't the real victory. The real victory was becoming the kind of man who could lose the game he'd waited his whole life for and still rise. That's what I want you to learn. Not how to score goals. Not how to lift weights or sprint faster or strike the ball with both feet. No. I want you to learn how to lose with dignity. How to keep your heart open, even when the world gives you 1,000 reasons to close it. How to listen more than you speak, but never let your silence become fear. I want you to understand that football, this game we love, it's a mirror. It will show you who you are and who you're becoming. It will humble you. It will hurt you. It will give you the most beautiful nights of your life, and the darkest ones too. But most of all, it will teach you how to fight, not with anger, but with purpose. And Zlatan, whether he knows it or not, was one of my silent teachers. You know what he taught me? That presence matters. That you don't have to explain yourself to be respected. That you don't have to shout to be heard. There's a power in stillness. A power in owning your space, your truth, your fire, without apology. People always compared us, said we were opposites, that I was discipline and he was chaos. But I never saw it that way. I saw a man who refused to let the world tell him who he could be. And in my own way, I learned to do the same. That's what I want for you, Junior. Not to be like me, not to be like him, but to be you, without apology. You're going to have people tell you what you can't do. They'll doubt you. They'll try to box you in. But remember this. You were born from fire, from sacrifice, from silence, from nights when your father had nothing but a dream and a prayer. So walk tall, even when the lights are off. Speak softly, but let your actions roar. And when you fall, because you will fall, don't ask the world for permission to rise. Just rise. Because football taught me how to score. But falling down, son, falling down taught me how to live. You know, Junior, I've played more than 1,000 matches. I've broken records people thought were untouchable. I've stood on stages holding golden trophies while the world clapped. But the moment I'm most proud of, it's not one you'll find in a highlight reel. It was a night, years ago, when you ran into my arms after a match. Your tiny arms around my neck. You whispered, "Did we win, Papa?" And I didn't answer right away. Because the truth is, I didn't care about the scoreboard that night. We hadn't won. I hadn't scored. The media would probably call it a quiet game for me. But when I looked into your eyes, wide, proud, full of love, I realized something no stat sheet could measure. That night, I had already won. Not the match, but the man I was trying to become. You see, son, football made me famous. But being your father, that made me human. And what I want to give you, more than fame, more than wealth, more than pressure, is wisdom. The kind you don't learn on a pitch. The kind Ibrahimović carried in his silence. Because whether the world loves you or doubts you, whether you're scoring hat tricks or sitting on the bench, you have to know who you are. Never mistake noise for truth. Never confuse applause for love. And never let a defeat or a victory define your worth. You'll meet people like him, like Zlatan, on your journey. People who don't say much, but whose presence feels like thunder. People who walk into a room and shift its gravity. Watch them. Not to copy them, but to understand what belief really looks like. Belief isn't loud. It's not always smiling. It's not perfect. It's calm. It's knowing who you are, even when no one else sees it yet. And now, to everyone watching this, you don't have to be Cristiano Ronaldo. You don't have to be Ibrahimović. You don't need 90,000 fans chanting your name to become someone your children will remember. What you need is truth. Truth in how you show up. Truth in how you love. Truth in how you endure. Because the world doesn't always reward truth, but it remembers it. So to the fathers out there, hug your kids after every game. Not for the result, but for the effort. And to the sons, don't just chase your father's footsteps. Ask him about his pain. Ask him about the nights he wanted to quit. About the games no one saw. About the lessons he learned in silence. Because that's where the real gold is. That's where you'll find the man behind the jersey. And maybe, just maybe, that's where you'll find yourself, too. So if this story touched you, if you saw a part of your own journey in mine, share it. Tell someone. A father. A son. A teammate. Remind them that greatness doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just walks in silence, like Ibrahimović. And if you want more stories like this, stories from the heart, from the soul, from behind the roar of the stadium, subscribe. Because the greatest goals I've ever scored, they weren't made with my feet. They were made in moments like this. With you.